please confirm if you can hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Yes, we
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much
Yeah, we
for the
can hear you.
confirmation. Thank you so much for the confirmation. This is Abdul Rahman Nasir from Electrical Engineering Department of FAST University, Islamabad. Today, I have the honor of hosting yet another seminar for the NUES. We'll begin our seminar with the blessed verses of the Holy Quran. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن للمتقين مفازا حدائق وأعنابا وكواعب أترابا وكأسا دهاقا لا يسمعون فيها لغوا ولا كذابا جزاء من ربك عطاء حسابا رب السماوات والأرض وما بينهما الرحمن لا يملكون منه خطابا يوم يقوم الروح والملائكة صفا لا يتكلمون إلا من أذن له الرحمن وقال صوابا ذلك اليوم الحق فمن شاء اتخذ إلى ربه مآبا إنا أنذرناكم عذابا قريبا يوم ينظر المرء ما قدمت يداه ويقول الكافر يا ليتني كنت ترابا. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful. Indeed, for the righteous is attainment, gardens and grape wines, and full-breasted companions of equal age, and a full cup. No ill speech will they hear therein nor any falsehood. As reward from your Lord, a generous gift made due by account. From the Lord of the heavens and the earth and whatever is between them, the most merciful. They possess not from him authority for speech. The day that the Spirit and the angels will stand in rows, they will not speak except for one whom the most merciful permits, and he will say what is correct. That is the true day, so he who wills may take to his Lord a way of return. Indeed, we have warned you of a near punishment on the day when a man will observe what his hands have put forth, and the disbeliever will say, "Oh, I wish that I were dust." Sadaqallahu al-Azim. Now, continuing with the event details, as you all must have heard by now, FAST University Islamabad has officially introduced a 4-year degree program with the name Internet of Things, or in its abbreviation, we all know it as IoT. Today's seminar focuses on IoT and the cybersecurity issues it brings with its entire reality. Our today's speaker will share his experience and will tell us about how much he has experienced in this challenging field of IoT security. We will also get to learn about the attacks on 3 important parameters that have been termed as CIA. C stands for confidentiality, I stands for integrity, and A stands for authenticity. Finally, our speaker will tell us of the mitigation techniques he has developed to provide CIA guarantees. Now, getting ahead with the details of our today's speaker, today NUES and I have the honor of welcoming Dr. Muhammad Naveed Aman, I believe. He is currently a senior research fellow at the National University of Singapore. He previously worked as an assistant professor at FAST University. He got his PhD from RPI, New York, USA. His research explores 3 common areas. The First one is hardware systems security in embedded devices. The second one is physical layer of security of IoT devices. And finally, we have cybersecurity for autonomous systems. Moreover, Dr. Naveed has published over 50 research papers in prestigious conferences of the world. To be very honest, I was quite excited to know more about him after I got this profile, and all my fellows at NUS were likewise impressed by the profile. We now look forward to learn about IoT from him, which he has a lot of experience in. Over to you, Dr. Naveed. If you're saying something, I can't hear you. It's maybe the mic is muted, that's why.
Oh, sorry, yeah. Yeah, thanks for the nice introduction. Let me just share my screen first.
My pleasure.
Can you see the screen?
Yes, it's visible.
Okay. Okay, so hi everyone. Thanks, Dr. Mukhtar. Thanks, NUES, for inviting me. I've been collaborating with Dr. Mukhtar for a long time now, and when I heard that you guys are starting a program on the Internet of Things, he suggested we should have a webinar so that the faculty, the students, or even anyone considering to join this program can benefit from this webinar. So I just wanted to, introduce. Although Abdurrahman did a good job in introducing me, but so just to tell you, I spent almost 5 years at FAST Peshawar campus. And then now I've been working at the National University of Singapore, first as a postdoc and now as a senior research fellow for the last 6 years. This is just a brief outline of what you would be seeing today. I guess Abdurrahman already told you about this. So let's go to the introduction. What are Internet of Things? Because I believe many of you won't even know what this term means. So this webinar, it actually targets not only the students or faculty, but also people who are very new to Internet of Things. So I would try to, I tried to make this more broader and include everyone so that the faculty can benefit from it, the current students can benefit from it, and any new one who wants to join could also benefit from it. So before going into the actual introduction, let's watch a short clip from Knight Rider 1982. Okay, so you see, I hope, did you guys hear? Could you hear the audio?
No, sir, we're unable to hear the audio.
Oh, okay, never mind. So in this clip, this was from 1982, where no one even talked about Internet of Things, but this movie came out even before I was born. So the car talks back to the guy, and he's like really surprised what just happened. So the idea of Internet of Things was there like in that time, So how did the Internet of Things evolve over time? So in the beginning, we had fixed mobile telephony and only SMS. So humans were talking to other humans. Then email came in. Email was a big thing. And then some entertainment and stuff like that. So that brought us to the Internet of Content. Then e-productivity, e-commerce came into the play, and Internet of Services, just to name these. And nowadays, social media is at its peak. But when it came out, it was called the Internet of People, at least. Now, at this end, we have machine-to-machine communication. So on the left end, you have humans talking to other humans. And on this end, we have machines talking to other machines. So this is what the Internet of Things has brought us to. So we have devices which are talking, tracking, monitoring, and doing a lot of things. And why we call it the Internet of Things, because now physical objects have the ability to communicate. Okay? So normally when we say Internet of Things, we call them headless objects. Okay? Why headless? Because there won't be any operator operating them. There would be a sensor which is sensing some quantity, maybe the temperature in a room, and then it would make its own decisions as well. So it has these are the three main characteristics of IoT devices. They would be connected to the internet, they would communicate information, and they would have some intelligence. So when we say intelligence, it doesn't necessarily mean that they can do all the processing, the complex processing. But what we mean is that they can actually at least sense some data or like get data from the environment and then send it back to the users. Okay, so in simple words, any physical object, but not a computer, that can be controlled through the internet connectivity and collects and shares data. So that means that if you have a light bulb that can be switched on and off using a smartphone, it qualifies as an IoT device. Then we have smart thermostats. I think someone's mic is on because I'm hearing some interference. So everyone, if they can check their mics, anyways. So the IoT device, they can span from simple sensors, children's toys, to very big things like driverless trucks. And then we might also have systems which are made of IoT devices. So for example, when we say, okay, a driverless truck, the driverless truck may have the Internet of Things inside as well, sensors and other things talking to each other. So the Internet of Things has penetrated a lot of industries over the last decade, actually, especially. So like the industrial Internet of Things, you must have heard the Industry 4.0 name. Then the Internet of Medical Things, we'll see examples of each one of them in a moment. The Internet of Vehicles are talking to each other. Just like the clip you saw where Knight Rider was talking to the guy and he got surprised. Internet of Military Things. So this might be new to some of you. We'll talk about it in a moment. Smart homes, and then agricultural IoT. This is gaining a lot of popularity. And one interesting thing is that I have been collaborating with Dr. Mukhtar and his PhD students regarding this agricultural IoT. So we've been developing some smart controllers for irrigation and stuff. This gives you an idea of the market share for IoT in 2020. So you can see that it's penetrating quite a lot into the mainstream application areas. So like in manufacturing, it's being used 22%. It has a market share of 22%, which is actually quite significant. Okay, so when we talk about industrial IoT, what we mean is that if you see over here, you have a robotic arm which is doing something. So this robotic arm would be equipped with different sensors at different points. So for example, if there are sensors at this junction, those sensors can send back feedback, to the user or operator over here, and he or she can see the status of this arm junction. Maybe it can also sense like the health of this arm in terms of is there any corrosion or other things. So it helps the operators to look at the current status of the different machines that are working in the industry, their health status, and the operator can also control them remotely. So industrial IoT it's a big thing, quite a big thing nowadays, because you want to automate a lot of things nowadays. Then we come to the Internet of Medical Things, where you have wearable sensors. So this can be a smartwatch, which is getting data in the form of the vital signs of a patient. And this example over here, this is a wearable sensor which was developed by Pfizer and IBM. So this band over here that the guy is wearing. So what it does is that it helps the doctors in studying the progression of the disease, in this case, the Parkinson's disease. So what they did was they gave the Parkinson's medicine to the patient, and then looking at the brain activity, they can adjust the dose of the medicine or drugs they give, and they can also see how the disease is progressing. So it's a very good way of enhancing doctor-patient communication as well. So this is one of the very interesting breakthroughs nowadays for Parkinson's, actually. Then we come to the internet, the agricultural IoTs. So this is an actual example of a system that is commercially available. So you have a smart irrigation system which senses the moisture in the field and then sends the data back, and then based on that data, smart controllers can open up the irrigation outlets or stop the irrigation depending on that. And this even also helps in doing a fertilizer application. So depending on the nutrients in the soil at a specific time and specific location, this system would tell you, okay, how much fertilizer you need to give and stuff like that. So it's a very smart way of doing it. So so most of the people would think, okay, it's just saving water. No, it's not only saving water. It is saving water, but it also results in better crops and more yield for the crops. Okay. So the Internet of Things goes to war. So this the Department of Defense in the USA, they're getting a lot of funding nowadays for the Internet of Things, military things. So you have robots, things which are in the field, or which at least go into the dangerous areas, and the person at a remote location can study the area, observe the area, and so it can help in saving lives and stuff. Then we have the smart home. So over here, what you're seeing is a camera. So most of you would have seen that if somebody has stayed in apartments, at least, they would see that there's a punch hole in the door through which you can see who's outside. So this is something like that, but it's a digital camera, and you can also see from a remote location. You can have face recognition and stuff. So it's a physical object, which is controlling the lock, and which has an eye over here. So it's also an IoT device. Over here you have a thermostat, a smart thermostat by Daikin. It's controlling the various air conditions in this household. So you can it would turn them on and off depending on the temperature, and as well as depending on the people that are present there. So you have sensors which are sensing if there is someone over there or not. So it results in better energy savings, and it would save you some bucks. Okay, so how does an IoT device work? Okay, so this is just a basic, just to give you a basic idea of how it works. So you have sensing technologies. Okay, so now sensing technologies come from the domain of electrical engineering, mechanical engineering, and other types of engineering. Then you have information management, okay, again mostly from computing. Data analytics, again mostly from computing. Then you have networking, embedded hardware, computer engineering. Radio spectrum, again electrical engineering. Mobile computing, again computer engineering, or even electrical. Communication technologies, so you might have Bluetooth, you might have Zigbee, other technologies, so it can be from computing or electrical. And then software architecture, so definitely from computing. So you can see that IoT, it's an interdisciplinary subject, because if you want to work in IoT, you have to have information of computing and other engineering areas. So I would say it's a very exciting field to work in, but a person should be very well equipped with different technologies. What is the human value for IoT? Okay, so again, just like the previous diagram, you go from device connection to data sensing to transport, analytics, and then at the end you have new applications, and you might have other benefits which I just described a while ago. Okay, so I wanted to show you, but I don't think you'll get the audio over here. So maybe I'll just, okay, let's see, maybe you can at least see it. Okay, so you're seeing that, different things are linked with each other. So you have billions and billions of devices that are talking to each other. So a light is talking, a traffic signal is talking. So the business of IoT is expected to go to $4 to $11 trillion by 2025. This is a very big amount. So you saw that, Internet of Things, there are billions of Internet of Things. They're producing huge amounts of data, and that data combined with artificial intelligence, that can lead to a lot of new exciting applications. But let's not get carried away. Yeah, IoT leads to a lot of new exciting applications and stuff. But what about the security? Okay, so now let's come to the security aspect, which is one of the biggest challenges of implementing IoT. So up till now, if you look at the legacy IoT devices, or for example, if you purchase a smart bulb from the market, normally they won't have any security capabilities. So this is a big problem. So by 2020, we were expecting a lot of IoT systems being deployed, but security is the bottleneck. So an IoT device, if you look at an IoT device, you have, these are the 4 basic layers. I mean, this is something relative. Someone else might define more layers, but I'm just going with a simplified stack. So you have, at the lowest layer, you have communication protocols. So you might have Bluetooth Low Energy, which we call BLE, the Zigbee, Wi-Fi, or even the serial port. Then after that, you have the firmware, which is sitting between the hardware and the hardware abstraction layer, which would be the microcontrollers. Normally when we say, okay, IoT devices, the microcontrollers, normally we would see are Atmel-based Arduino. I've seen Arduino microcontrollers a lot. But keep in mind that normally there would be 8-bit microcontrollers, very simple, with less processing power and stuff. Then at the top, you have the operating system or the real-time operating system. So Linux and Android, normally a lot of IoT devices would be Unix-based. Then you also have the real-time operating systems, the Raspbian, which is used in Raspberry Pi, and these others. So, and then even some IoT devices might not even have an OS. They might have some piece of code which directly interacts with the hardware. So for people who don't know what an RTOS, it's a real-time operating system which can, so the device can only carry out one task at a time. So what this does is that it takes that into account, and it does different tasks in parallel, but so quickly that you won't even know that they are being done sequentially or stuff. They're called real-time operating systems. They're quite popular in IoT devices. Okay, so what are the challenges with IoT devices? These are some of the general challenges, not specific to security. So the first and foremost and the most important one is constrained resources. So when we say resources, you have less energy. So when you look at your computer, it's connected to the grid, right? So you're not worried about the energy at least. But when you're talking about an IoT device, you are worried about energy because they have limited amounts of energy and they might even have to produce their own energy. And that's the reason being the remote location. They are normally deployed in remote locations. So for example, you have a traffic signal. Okay, the traffic signal is a smart traffic signal. So it might have some kind of solar panel to generate energy. And on the other, another example might be an irrigation sensor, a moisture sensor, which is remotely locatedly in an agricultural field. So again, it might have very limited energy resources. Then the processing power, I just mentioned that IoT devices normally would have 8-bit microcontrollers, which are not very strong in terms of computational processing power. And one of the reasons being is that they don't have much energy, so there's no use in putting a very powerful processor over there. Then they also have limited memory, so you can see that when you're developing a solution for a computer or something that is connected to the grid, or you're not constrained in terms of resources at least. But when you're designing something for IoT, you have to keep all of these things in mind. So it becomes even more challenging designing protocols and stuff for or algorithms for IoT devices. And then IoT devices, they would normally be on 24 hours. Okay, so no one would turn them off, so they just stay on. Okay, so someone would say, okay, well, what's the problem in that? The problem is that when something is always on, you cannot have any glitches. So in a normal computer, you can just restart the computer and that's fine. But when an IoT device is doing some critical operation, you cannot say, okay, if a glitch comes, just restart it. No, you can't do that. If it's controlling the temperature of, for example, a nuclear power plant, it can lead to a very big catastrophe. And then, as I said, remote location. So one was that in terms of energy, it has to generate its own energy. The other thing is when we talk about personal computers, right? Personal computers are physically well protected, so they're in your house. If an attacker wants to attack a personal computer, they might have to come through the internet. So, but at least they don't have physical access to the computer. But when we talk about IoT devices, an attacker may gain access to the physical device. So we say, okay, they're not physically well protected. Okay, and we'll see why this is an issue when it comes to security. And the other thing, a very frustrating thing, is that a lot of manufacturers of IoT devices, because IoT devices are very low-cost devices, they won't provide support for patches or testing or updates. So that becomes a problem, and IoT devices become even more vulnerable to cyber attacks. So just to show you how the evolution of attacks happen on IoT. So in 2005 to 2009, that was the time when IoT devices were becoming more mainstream, but still in a very infancy age, I would say. But there were some attacks at that time. The Stuxnet virus, which I would introduce to you in a moment. This happened in Iran. Their nuclear power plant was affected by it. Then some other, heart monitors and stuff. But the bulk of attacks happened from 2011 to 2019, when IoT started to become more popular, and some of the scary ones are here, where the water utility. So the SCADA, the SCADA system is normally, it depends on sensors and stuff. So again, someone attacked the water utility. Then the Mirai botnet, I would explain this in a moment. The Ukrainian power grid attack, Tesla models. So you can see that there are a lot of cyber criminals are being attracted to IoT devices. So now, when you look at the psychology of cyber criminal, they would like to attack something which they can get something out of. Right? So either that thing, that benefit they get out of the attack is financial, or maybe in some cases like terrorist attacks, in other cases invading the privacy of someone. So it depends on the benefit that they are gaining. But normally, most of the cyber criminals would be interested in money. So that's why we are seeing a lot of increase of attacks on IoT devices, as they are being used more and more in different application areas. So I just showed you previously that various application domains are the IoT devices are penetrating a lot of application domains at a very high speed, actually, pace. So finally, in 2020, most of the manufacturers, they realized that, okay, security is a main concern, and we should be spending some money on security. So that's where some manufacturers, but still, I mean, we've seen a lot of IoT devices. I'll explain it to you in a while. Which don't have any security in them. So we're still seeing that manufacturers, and it's natural, when an IoT device you can buy for maybe $5, how much would the manufacturer be willing to spend on security? So when we talk about security for any system, these are the three major um, things that you have to take care of in terms of security. First is confidentiality. So if an IoT device is sending some data, how do you make how to make sure that the data is sent in a privacy preserving way so no one can see what's being sent. Second is integrity. So as I showed you in some examples, a lot of decisions are being made on the data that is being generated by IoT devices. So what if somebody tampers that data? So in this case, let's say we have a smart irrigation system which is watering the crops. What if the attacker tampers with the moisture sensors and causes flooding of the crops? So that could lead to a very big problem. Um, okay, and the final one, and one of the very important ones, is authentication. So how does the IoT device make sure that only the authentic user has access to the data or to the device? Okay, and vice versa. So how does a server which is getting data from an IoT device, how does it make sure that the data that it got was from the IoT device that claims to be that IoT device? Okay, so it seems to be a funny sentence, but that's how it is. Okay, so let's look at some real world attacks. Okay. So these are some of the attacks. These are actually attacks carried out by checkpoint.com. They're a team of cybersecurity people who try to attack various IoT devices. So the first one is what they did is they sent. So nowadays you must have seen those all-in-one printers, right? So they have a fax, they have a scanner, and then they have a printer. So what they did, they sent a malicious file to the fax machine, which through which they got control of the fax machine. And now the fax machine was connected to an IT network, to the inside network. And through the fax machine, they got access to the whole network. So, and then DSLR cameras nowadays, if you look at these cameras, they would have Wi-Fi interfaces. So over here, what they showed that anyone can go on YouTube, search for these attacks, and you can see these attacks. So they used the Wi-Fi. They actually infected one of the cameras, and then that camera used the Wi-Fi interface to propagate infection to other cameras or even other computers which were connected to the Wi-Fi. Okay, so the third one they've shown is that if you have a smart light bulb hub, it has some vulnerabilities in the firmware through which you can get control over the hub. Now, you might say, okay, what if a DSLR camera is hacked? What if a fax machine is hacked? Yeah, these seem to be small examples, but we would see that the impact of this is very large. Okay, so just hang on. So now going to some of the scary ones. So what if someone's these three were actually came into the America's Department of Homeland Security report recently, where they said that okay, short-range access can be used to attack pacemakers, the heart pacemakers. So that could actually result to very bad consequences for the patient. Then, as I told you before, if a drip irrigation system is hacked, it can lead to flooding of the crops. Nowadays, what's happening is that you are also using IoT devices in the food industry. So what they do is they have temperature sensors, and then based on the temperature sensor readings, the air conditioning is controlled. So if someone hacks into the temperature sensor, they can actually cause the meat to go bad. So it could also result in a lot of loss of meat. and as well as could lead to other diseases in people if the meat goes into the market. Okay, so we just saw some examples where there was no proper authentication. Okay, so you got access to the devices, and then you can play around with the devices. And then we have some IoT devices which do have some kind of authentication, but it is very weak. And normally, in simple words, if you put it, they would all have default passwords or hard-coded passwords which you cannot change. So the adversary can easily access the device, put in the default password, and normally people won't change the default password. So let's look at some of the examples. Okay. So Mirai botnet. Okay, so this was an attack in 2016 where an undergraduate at Rutgers University, is the State University of New Jersey. So what he did was initially he was just showing the university administration that he can hack their systems. So by hack over here, what he did was he launched denial of service attacks on various systems while the registrations or midterms were going on. Sorry. So the motivation over here was he wanted to get a job. So he was showing the university administration that, I can launch various attacks. So why don't you hire me? And I can protect your system from them. But he was also a very, he liked to play that game called Minecraft. And what he would do is that in Minecraft, what happens is that you have different servers, and the more people a server has, it gets more money. So what they did was they would actually launch a denial of service attack on other servers. So which means that the other servers would go down, and then the customers or the players would come to their server and they would gain more money. So and how they carried it out, it was that these 2.5 million IoT devices, all of them had default passwords. So they generated a script which would just scan the IoT devices for open telnet ports, and then they would just check the default password. If you go in, well, you're in. So this was a very big attack, which also, so initially it was by a Rutgers University student who was just playing around with it, but then later on it was used by other people to carry out a very big scale attack, which took down Netflix, Amazon, and other services. Then came the Silex attack in 2019. So Silex attack, this is a very interesting attack because it was carried out by a 14-year-old boy. So what it would do is it would again get into the IoT device using a default login credentials. So any Unix-based IoT device which has default login credentials was affected by this. And what it would do is it would just wipe off the hard drive, and it would change the firewall rules. It would remove the network configuration. So in simple words, it didn't fry the IoT devices circuits. Apart from that, it was very catastrophic. It just trashed the IoT devices. The solution was simple, just to reinstall the firmware, but most of the people, they just threw away the IoT devices. They thought, the device hardware has gone bad or something. Okay, so the next attack, interesting one, is the Leappad Ultimate. So Leapfrog is a company which makes toys for kids, and the toys are mostly learning-based toys. So they created something called the Leappad Ultimate. It's like a tablet. But the problem with this was that the protocol that it used did not require any authentication within 100 feet of that device. So it could be easily targeted, and you could send messages to children and even look at their location. So it's actually quite dangerous. Then came the iLink P2p bug. This was very interesting because it affected over 2 million IP security cameras, baby monitors, and doorbells. So again, a case where there was an authentication vulnerability in the device, and attackers exploited that, and they could intercept the traffic and stuff. So you can see that these IoT devices, they're not very well designed for as far as security is concerned. Now, as I said, that okay, hacking a fax machine, what's the big deal? Well, the big deal is that the implications are really bad. So the Stuxnet attack on the Iran nuclear facilities. So what happened is that it targeted the supervisory control and data acquisition, which we normally call SCADA. And SCADA has a lot of small devices called the programmable logic controllers, PLCs. So this worm, it entered one of the systems through a USB drive. And then in turn, it affected a lot of PLCs. And what happened is that it caused the centrifuges to spin really fast, and the centrifuges would tear themselves apart. So as you see, a USB drive resulted in such a big attack. The second one is the Ukraine power outage. So what happened is that in Christmas of 2015, hackers compromised the Ukraine power system. It was the first known attack on a power grid where 230,000 people were without electricity for a period of 1 to 6 hours. Well, I guess it's quite normal in Pakistan, but outside it's not. So it was a very big deal. So how did it happen is, again, through the SCADA. A malware came into one of the systems through a phishing email. So someone received a malicious email, and then through that email, it infected the system, and then from the system, it goes into the other IoT devices. And it took down it resulted in a very big blackout. Then Saudi Aramco attack, it happened in 2012 in Ramadan. So the number of employees was less. Most of the employees were on holidays because of Ramadan. So again, through a phishing email, one of the system is attacked, and then the virus propagates to the other systems. So what this virus was, it was called Shamoon. So apparently it had something to do with the oppression and stuff like that. The group which claimed the responsibility, they had some weird kind of explanations of why they carried out the attack. But anyways, so what it did was it overwrites the hard disk drives, and then eventually it also overwrites the master boot record. And if someone knows about the master boot record, but it's a very important portion in the hard disk which is responsible for booting the system. So actually the systems, almost 30,000 of their workstations were taken down. So as you can see that all of these attacks, they started from a single system, maybe through a USB, through an email, but they had a big impact. So the Saudi Aramco was halted for like about a week, no oil production, anything. So you can just imagine the scale of loss they faced in this case. Okay, so now let's go to the. I'll just give you a brief idea of different techniques that we developed at the NUS Singtel Cybersecurity R&D Lab. So the first scheme is a scheme which uses channel information to authenticate a device based on location. So, for example, you have a radius, okay, and you want to see you say that okay, if any device is within this radius, it should have access to the network or whatever, or the resources. But if it's outside, it should not be able to connect to the inside network. So this is how we normally describe a protocol. So in this, you have different messages saying, okay, the IoT device would send this message to the wireless gateway, and then the wireless gateway sends a message to the server, and so on. So I won't go into the details, but just to give you an idea. And then you have, so whenever you're, as I said, developing protocols for IoT devices is very challenging because you have to look at various things. And one of the important things is energy. Okay? So you have to measure the energy, how much energy does your protocol require, and then compare it with the existing ones or so. So as I said before, that integrity is very important. So if a server is receiving some data, and then some decision is to be made based on that data. For example, a doctor receives some data about a patient, and then based on that data, the doctor has to make a decision about that patient. Now that data should be authentic, right? So that's what data provenance is. It basically tells you that the data has actually come from the device which claims to be the legitimate device. So it protects the integrity as well. So over here, what we did, again, we have a legitimate device. This was our lab. A legitimate device, then we have a base station, and we have an adversary over here, an attacker. So what we did was the legitimate device was moving around at different places. And then we had two attackers, actually, A1 and A2. And the attackers tried to impersonate this IoT device and send data to the base station. So using this scheme, which looks quite complex, but in fact, it's not that complex. But using physical channel characteristics. So again, you see here, I'm using the word algorithm, I'm using the word physical channel characteristics, I'm using computational complexity. So you get an idea that working in IoT, you should have knowledge of engineering as well as computing. So it's a very interdisciplinary area. Again, this, like the last technique, it was published in the IEEE IoT journal, which is the top venue for IoT papers. Very good impact factors, and the patent for this is also pending. Okay, so this is so when you have IoT devices, as I said, some IoT devices will be deployed in remote locations. So an attacker has physical access to the device. Now, how can an attacker exploit that? So IoT devices, normally you can flash their firmware. So by flashing their firmware, you can introduce certain malicious instructions inside the code. And using those malicious instructions, you can attack the whole system. So if you have an IoT device, maybe which is located in the fields, how can you verify the firmware of that IoT device remotely? So you're sitting in your office and you want to verify whether the firmware that is running on the IoT device is it authentic or legitimate. How do you do that? So this was a scheme we developed, and it was one of the first schemes which actually did not require the legitimate firmware to carry out attestation. So attestation is just the process of verifying the authenticity of the firmware or software that is running on the IoT device. So this is the system model we used, and then some experiments with different Arduino boards and stuff. And then we have probability of detection. You want to see, okay, what is the probability of detecting an attack? So it's a very exciting and interesting area. Okay, so this is something we developed for the Internet of Vehicles. How do you authenticate? How do you carry out authentication in the Internet of Vehicles? So we carried that out in Singapore. So you can see the map over here. And then this was the basic system model where you have roadside units, you have a roadside unit gateway, you have the trusted authority, which can be the Department of Motor Vehicles. And then to verify the protocol, there are various automatic security verification tools which can tell you, okay, which can actually test the protocol against various attacks and tell you, okay, is the protocol safe against all these attacks? So just to give you an idea, how do you verify this, the security protocols? And then we compared it with one of the existing protocols, and you can see that the proposed protocol has a very high throughput as compared to the existing. So this one we tested in Singapore. The patent was filed recently, so it takes a long time to patent it. One of the things we are doing nowadays is how do we attack? So you must have seen the keyless, the keyless entry systems, right? You go to the car and then you press a button, or in some of the advanced cars, you don't even need to press a button as long as the car key is in your pocket. You don't need a key. You just open the door, it opens, and then you can just start the car as well without the key, as long as it is within the vicinity of the vehicle. So these are some of the attacks we carried out. So the first one is, so what happens normally in these type of vehicles is that the vehicle would constantly send a message at a low frequency. Okay? Now, when the key comes in close contact, so normally the range is within 1 to 2 meters. So when the key is here, the key would send an acknowledgement to the car, and then the car door opens. Now, what we did was, within 1 to 2 meters, we put a relay, and we relayed that low frequency signal to the key. Okay, so the key owner or the key was at a further distance, but we relayed the signal to the key, and we were able to open the car. So very interesting. The other type of attacks we carried out is that we amplified the signal. So for example, if the key is very far away from the car, we used repeaters and amplifiers to relay the signals back to the car to unlock it. Then in some cases, we also found that, okay, if you do some cryptanalysis on the key, so you send some challenge, then the key would respond with some with an answer. If you collect a sufficient number of challenge response pairs, you can actually get the secret key inside the digital secret key inside the physical key. So using that digital secret key, you can actually open the car and even start it. So this paper is under review. The prototypes have been developed, but it's under review in one of the top venues for security, the IEEE transactions on information forensics and security. Okay, so this is another very interesting attack we carried out here. So if someone has played Pokemon, they know that a lot of people try to spoof the GPS. By spoofing, what means that maybe you're located in Islamabad, but you tell the mobile phone you're located in Peshawar. So that's spoofing. So over here, what we did was we successfully carried out spoofing attacks on the mobile GPS. So we were located in the NUS campus of Singapore, and once we carried out the spoofing attack, the mobile was showing China. Even the time was different. So what we did was we used software-defined radios to generate authentic GPS signals, and then those GPS signals were sent to the receiver. And the authentic GPS signals comes from like 19,500 kilometers away from the satellites. So if you send the spoofed signal at a better, I would say, power, it overshadows the authentic signal, and the receiver thinks that, okay, this signal is the spoofed signal is actually the authentic signal. So it was something very interesting. Again, this is in review. This is the work we did to protect power grids from GPS spoofing. Again, we use some statistical tests over here. And so you can see that, as I'm saying, statistical tests. So someone working in this domain has to have knowledge of these statistical tests. They should have knowledge of physical layer characteristics and stuff. So like digital communication, if the current students, someone is studying communication, digital communication is very important over here. This was something so we didn't, when you look at the literature, you don't find much work on how would you patch an IoT device. So in your mobile phone, you get an update, right? So when you update the mobile phone, what happens? It provides you with some security features. Updated security features protects the mobile device. But IoT devices, normally, as I said, the manufacturers won't support it. So how do you do virtual patching? So this was something we did where we can isolate the compromised IoT devices without patching the devices or updating the devices. This has been published. This is something very new, which recently got accepted in the IEEE Communication Standards magazine, where we use something called security function virtualization in 6G IoT networks. So again, the purpose was how can you stop the spread of malware in an IoT network. So be sure that, okay, using our scheme, we're using the security function virtualization. If you're interested, you can just search it online. I don't have time to go through the details of what it is, but it's something new for 6G. Okay, so after looking at all of this, what's the way forward? So this is a forecast of IoT devices. So by 2025, you can see that we expect around 35 billion IoT devices. Okay, so it's a very large number of IoT devices, and this is just an estimate. The actual number is expected to be 50 billion. So what is the future of IoT? So when we talk about 6G, we are going from connected things to connected intelligence. So now I showed you IoT devices which were making their own decisions. But how can we combine multiple IoT devices to make bigger decisions, to use the resources of each other to get more intelligence? So that's called connected intelligence. And then there's the concept of human 4.0. So just like industry 4.0, human 4.0. So let's say I'm located in Singapore right now, and someone is located in Pakistan. How can I interact with them just in the same way? How can I create an experience which is very similar to what I would feel when I'm physically close to them? Okay, so Human 4.0 is envisioned as a technology where humans can interact in real time or large distances with other humans, and the experience should be real. So you have sensors on your hands which would give you haptic feedbacks. So for example, I shake the hand of someone, it should feel real. It should feel like I'm actually shaking the hand of that guy. So and then it would lead to remote learning, surgery, and repair, some new areas. And it's based on immersive mixed reality. So some of you, if you're interested in virtual reality or augmented reality, this is kind of mixed reality. So I plan to show you this video, but I have no idea how to share my sound with you. So I'll just skip it. But the word of caution was that this guy, what he does, he has an IoT smart home. So, but what happens is that he like his door lock is also a smart lock. So after he goes to the dentist, he cannot speak open door properly. So he just keeps on saying open door, but the door doesn't open because the IoT device can't recognize it as as an open door command. So uh, so now he's coming back home. So he just keeps on saying open door, and the door keeps on saying wrong voice command. So, so IoT devices, they might change the world, but there is a word of caution that if you're designing an IoT system, it should be designed carefully. So I come to my final slide. So this is a quote by Jared Newman, who said that, and just like any company that blissfully ignored the internet at the turn of the century, the ones that dismiss the Internet of Things risk getting left behind. So one of the cases is Nokia. So when Android came in, Nokia didn't want to switch from their operating system, which was called Symbian, to the Android operating system. And you can see what happened to Nokia now. So just like that, if we do not move forward and we do not accept the Internet of Things, we're going to be left behind. Okay, so I hope you got to learn something today. I tried to keep it more general and more interesting. Thanks. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
If anyone has a question, please raise your hand and I'll call out your name. Then you may unmute your mic. Please raise your hands if you have a question. We have a question in the chat. Dr. Naveed, I hope you can open the chat. If you can't, then I'll just ask them to unmute their mics. Please let me know if the chat is visible. Your mic is muted. If you're saying something, I can't hear you.
Engineers are bringing AI to IoT devices for securing them. My question is how the intense resource-consuming AI algorithms will be implemented in very resource-constrained IoT devices. So as I told you before that, you do not implement the AI algorithms on the IoT devices itself. You implement the AI algorithms either on the edge or in the cloud. So the IoT devices will provide you with the data, and then the AI or the data analytics is done on the edge or the cloud. So it's normally the IoT device cannot do that. And going forward, when you go to 6G, as I said, connected intelligence, multiple IoT devices can share their resources to carry out more complex algorithms. But that is something we expect to see in the future. Okay, so there's another question. Can you please make the comparison of cybersecurity and IoT area? Okay, so cybersecurity is not only related to IoT. Okay, cybersecurity is a very broad domain where you have other areas. For example, you have security for Android, you have security for IoT, for computers, computer security. So, but when you talk about IoT, security is one of the aspects of IoT. So, I mean, Fast Islamabad has done a good job in, introducing IoT as a course. But I think you guys also have a cybersecurity. I haven't looked at the course contents of cybersecurity, but what I can guess is that cybersecurity, BS in cybersecurity would be more broader course. And then BS IoT, as I showed you that IoT is not only security, you have electrical engineering in terms of sensing devices, you have embedded hardware, you have operating systems. So it's like an amalgamation of different fields. So security is one of the important aspects, but it's not the only aspect. So you need to study a lot of things. But in BS cybersecurity, I think the focus would be more on algorithms and how to attack algorithms, how to attack computer security and stuff like that. Okay, so we have another. Is there any system event logging system in embedded operating systems like Rtos embed? It says so. Normally, what happens is that in these devices you have very limited storage. So if you install an SD card, then yeah, you can do this event logging.
I had a question. If you say so, I may ask my question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So we discussed about how connectivity matters a lot in Internet of Things. We can estimate that there will be a lot of infrastructure. We might need a lot of construction because obviously we will have some towers for communication purpose.
So when you talk about IoT, so normally 5G and 6G are envisioned as the enablers of IoT. So as long as you have the 5G infrastructure, 6G infrastructure, no issue with that. You don't need any extra infrastructure for that. Okay. So we have a question. What is the future of IoT other than automation? If we had converted all simple devices to IoT devices, what will be the next thing it will offer to consumers as well manufacturers? Okay, I don't really understand the exact question. What is the future of IoT other than automation? Okay, so what I understand is that what is apart from automation, what is the future of IoT devices? So as I gave you various examples, one was the Internet of Medical Things, right? So you're observing patients remotely, and you're observing their stats and everything, and then based on that, you're making better decisions. So the basic purpose is to make better decisions. Okay, so based on data which the IoT devices are collecting, you apply data analytics and other techniques to make better decisions. So I would say that other than automation, it is making better decisions. Okay, so one says, can you briefly tell possible attack vectors which can be carried out against IoT devices? So I guess I did try to cover that briefly in my talk. But if you want me to summarize again, so the first attack vector would be someone getting physical access of the IoT device and um, flashing the firmware, okay, reflashing the firmware. The second would be a man in the middle. Okay, so IoT device sends something, and then man in the middle takes over and sends something else, data tampering. Okay. Um, so normally the attack vectors, apart from the physical attack, the attack vectors would normally be the same as the other, as normal when we talk about the computer networks. But if you say one is unique about IoT devices, it's they're not physically well protected. So so one of them is that the attacker would flash the device. Second is the attacker can carry out physical attacks on the device to extract secrets like keys and stuff. So I would say that is unique to IoT devices. Okay, so Rashid Ramzan Saab says LoRa is the protocol for ultra low power sensor and smart dust. How to secure them? Okay, so these physical layer, at the physical layer, you might have LoRa or you might have any other communication technology. Okay, now the purpose of security is to make a scheme which does not depend on the physical protocol that you're using. Okay. But in some cases, it might be beneficial to use one or other protocol. For example, if you are transmitting at very high frequencies, um, so like you must have heard the word of those in 5G. You have very short range communications because the frequency is very high. So that actually is advantageous for security because the signals are not propagating to a very large area. So if an attacker is listening to the signals, he cannot get the signals outside the room. So apart from that, when we design security protocols, we would try to design them based on encryption or encryption primitives or other hardware security primitives rather than considering a specific technology. I hope that answers your question. Okay, development in IoT also requires development in cybersecurity, right? If security isn't enough, isn't that concludes that either this way or other way we provide everyone access to our private life? Well, if someone thinks they have a private life, I highly doubt that. Nowadays, having a private life is, I would say, it would be a luxury, but but yeah, when you go towards IoT devices, privacy is a big concern, and your privacy might be invaded. That is totally true. How do we manage hardware security for low-end IoT devices? So, how do we manage hardware security for low-end IoT devices? So when we talk about low-end IoT devices, we want to create use security primitives which do not require very I would say, which are not computationally complex. So that's why in my protocols, we have been focusing on hardware security primitives like physically unclonable functions and stuff like that, or even the physical channel, extracting some secrets from the physical channel, so that we don't really put a big burden on the IoT device by, for instance, if you've heard the name of public key infrastructure, PKI. So it's very computationally complex. So by using symmetric key protocols, we can reduce the complexity. So that's how we do it. Okay. What is the purpose of airflow sensors? Okay, I have no idea. Airflow sensors. I'll go over to the next, but I mean, there are so many IoT applications. Uh, Maybe airflow sensors are. I reviewed a paper recently which was called AirKit. So what they were doing was they were actually looking at the quality of the air. So maybe this is the same, but I don't know about that. Okay, what are the technological limitations of IoT and how to improve them? Can relate TinyML with IoT. Yeah, so again, the technological limitations I just described earlier, that they are constrained in terms of energy, processing power, and memory. So you do have like TinyML, you have TinyECC. So elliptic curve cryptography, if you've heard the name, it's quite complex. So IoT devices won't even have the library to implement them. But then we have TinyECC to carry out different operations. So yeah, people are creating these libraries to help implementing various kind of protocols or algorithms on IoT devices. Yeah. Okay, Dr. Mukhtar wants some few words about edge IoT. So again, the concept of edge IoT is again offloading some computations from the IoT devices and putting them on some edge devices. So again, the concept is the same, that you want to lighten the IoT devices in terms of computational processing. Okay, the next is, will FAST provide us with proper knowledge about security? Okay, so this question, I would recommend FAST to include security as one of the major. Okay, so Dr. Rashid Ramzan has said, sure, we would do so. Security is an important aspect, I guess. They would definitely have uh, some courses or others in about cybersecurity in IoT course. Okay, so what is the relation between Internet of Things and Arduino? So Arduino is one of the platforms that is used to um, used as an IoT device. So in one of my slides, you must have seen that, okay, this is the IoT device which is moving around, and that was actually an Arduino board. So Arduino is quite commonly used as an IoT device. You can program it to do different things. Okay. Can you comment on hardware only or hybrid based security solutions? Okay, so when you talk about hardware only security solutions, it's normally not relevant to IoT devices, because IoT devices won't have those hardware security primitives, for example, like a trusted platform module. So a trusted platform module you won't find on many IoT, on majority of the IoT devices. So you really can't say, okay, I want a hardware-based solution for IoT, unless you go to more lightweight hardware security primitives like physically unclonable functions. Even if you look at the Raspberry Pi, it has a trust zone, but when we carried out our experiments, it was actually useless for us. So we didn't use the trust zone. But when you talk about hybrid security solutions, yeah, so that's where you can use lightweight security primitives and combine them with software to provide security. Yeah, that's more common. Okay. Okay, so Abhi asks, what's the relationship between IoT and digital twin technology? I'm looking at this word for the first time, Abi, digital twin technology. If you can, because normally these terminologies are specific, if you can elaborate more, maybe I can comment on that. Okay, so Dr. Mukhtar says digital twins are detailed physical models. Maybe Dr. Mukhtar, you can comment on it.
So actually, the digital twins are very detailed models, and they are so detailed that you can actually eliminate physical experiments and physical tests. You wouldn't believe, but there are computational models which are more reliable than experiments, because in an experiment you can make mistakes. Those models will never make mistakes. In IoT, the digital twins will be needed.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, I think if in that regard, if you say okay, a detailed physical model, so in terms of security, I would interpret it as so we've been using something called a physically unclonable function. So what that means is that every device, so if you have an integrated circuit, you have two identical ICs. Now those ICs are identical, but actually they have differences at microscopic levels. Okay, just like you said, okay, at a very detailed physical model. But over here, what we can exploit in security, in terms of security, is that you have differences at the microscopic level, and exploiting those differences, we can actually identify various IoT devices. So, for example, if let me give you an example from computer logic design. So let's say you have two paths, okay, in parallel, and then you have certain gates in those paths, and at the end you have two latches, okay. Now, if you have two identical ICs which implement this, what would happen is that one of the paths would have a lower latency than the other. Okay, so the signals that are flowing on that part would reach the latch before the other, and depending on that, the latch would have certain output. So that's what we exploit, and that's how we can actually identify IoT devices. Okay. Okay, so Abhi says digital twins are virtual model of physical realization. Yeah, so that's how you can. But I certainly, I doubt that it would be helpful in security. But anyways, we would see. Why is chemistry a requirement for admission? Okay, I guess that is not concerned to me. Okay. Okay, yeah, so I think maybe Dr. Mukhtar, there's a question, why is chemistry a requirement for
Actually,
admission?
yeah, I will just have a brief comment on that because you already explained that it is an interdisciplinary area. So in these two new programs, robotics and IoT, you cannot actually ignore the importance of materials. So future is about materials, because many of the designs are done at the level of materials. So I don't think you can understand principles of material without having background in chemistry. So that's
Okay, so let me just add over here. One thing I've learned over the past 10, 11 years of my career is that nothing is useless.
ठीक है बिल्कुल ये कहेंगे
And
सरकारी मुलाजमों की तनख्वाह बंद कर रहे हैं और ये तो सर अभी मुफ्त ही चल रही है ना
is
इसलिए दो
someone
डोजेज
asking a question?
एंडीज
Rafi
के
sir,
बाद ये खाल
आपका mic on है Rafi sir.
Okay, so when you talk about IoT devices, you never know. It might be helpful for you. So as Dr. Mukhtar said, that nothing goes to waste, and this is a very interdisciplinary area. You never know, in the future you might need it.
Just to give you one brief example, you all know how this gyroscope is implemented in these mobile phones. Okay, so normally when you imagine a gyroscope, it's a mechanical device and it's very huge. There's no way you can fit it into a mobile phone. But thanks to material science, and they have implemented it, and when you look at it, you can't even imagine that this could be functioning as a gyroscope. So I mean, this miniaturization will require this.
So one important aspect of IoT devices is the device itself, and then we are also moving towards Internet of Nano things and stuff like that. So nanotechnology. So if you go there, then you definitely need chemistry and knowledge of chemistry and chemical engineering and stuff like that. So it would actually help you if you want to go to various areas, at least after your bachelor's. इस वेबिनार की सर्टिफिकेट मिलेगी, I think, I don't know.
If anyone still has a question, don't forget the chat box is open for you, or you can raise a hand.
Yeah, Dr. Mukhtar says battery management. Yeah, that's a very good answer. So as energy is one of the important aspects of IoT devices, definitely chemistry would help in battery management. Yeah.
So
if there are no more questions, I think then we should thank Dr. Naveed Aman that he actually agreed. He was kind enough to give this wonderful presentation. I can imagine many requests from those who missed this out. So I'll request the NUS team to make this recording available so that we can put it on our website as well as on our social media platforms. So thank you, Dr. Naveed.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me.
We will surely try our best to put this recording out there for whoever wants it. Once again, NUS has brought you another seminar, and to be very honest, I have been searching about IoT myself. But when you get to learn from someone who has an experience in the field, that's something unique. And thanks to Dr. Naveed, we got that knowledge from someone who has the experience. It was great to have him here at NUS, and as a student of FAST University, I'm very thankful towards him for being here. I also thank all the attendees who came here, made this event lively. To everyone, I would like to say Allah Hafiz and have a good day.
Thank you. Bye.